Hashtag why some people click with everyone, and how to actually learn it. You know that person. The one who gets along with absolutely everybody. You have one normal conversation with them. Nothing dramatic. But hours later, you're still thinking about it. You told them something you've never told anyone else. Next time you need to vent, they're the first name in your head. In meetings, everyone gravitates toward them. When they're in the room, the whole team works better. They solve problems, get buy-in, and somehow nobody ever feels manipulated. It looks like magic. It isn't. Today's book is Supercommunicators by Charles Duhigg, the same journalist who wrote The Power of Habit. His argument is simple. The ability to click with anyone isn't a personality trait you're born with. It's a skill, a specific, learnable skill. And once you see how it works, you'll start noticing it everywhere. Let me show you. The brain experiment that cracked it open. Researchers gathered volunteers and showed them short, silent, confusing film clips. A bald man arguing, a cowboy at a sink, no context. While they watched, brain scans showed everyone's neural activity was completely different. Then they split people into small groups to discuss what the clips meant. After an hour, they scanned their brains again. Something wild had happened. Inside each group, brain activity had started to sync. People were literally thinking in the same rhythms. But here's the twist. Some groups synced far more than others. Same task, same setup, different outcome. Why? The researchers looked for a dominant leader driving the group. Nope, the opposite. Groups with a strong leader had the lowest sync. When one person takes over, everyone else drifts into their own head. The groups that synced the hardest had one or two people doing something different. They talked less, asked way more questions, restated what others had said, gently nudged people to keep going. When things got awkward, they cracked a joke or offered a new angle. Researchers had a name for them, high-centrality participants. Mouthful. But the pattern was crystal clear. When these people spoke, everyone leaned in. Whatever position they quietly backed usually became the group's final answer, but nobody noticed it happening. Everyone thought they'd made up their own mind. When researchers looked at these people's lives outside the lab, the pattern held. Bigger social networks, higher positions at work. More people came to them for advice. Those are the supercommunicators. The reason they can do what they do comes down to one thing. They're exceptionally good at getting their brain in sync with the person in front of them. But how does this syncing actually work at the brain level? Princeton researchers later had people listen to a woman tell a long, chaotic story about prom night. The listeners' brains fell into rhythm with hers, feeling the tension, the joy, the anxiety, as if living the story together. And the more in sync their brains were, the more details they remembered afterward. By 2010, this was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Neural coupling between speaker and listener predicts how successful a conversation will be. So the whole game becomes, how do supercommunicators pull people into sync? The 3 kinds of conversation. Duhigg's answer is simpler than you'd think. Every conversation, no matter what it's about, falls into one of 3 types. And each type activates a different part of your brain. Type 1, practical, you're figuring something out. How do we handle the kids' grades? Should I take this job? Your prefrontal cortex lights up, the decision-making, analytical part of the brain. Type 2, emotional. You're not looking for advice. You're looking to be understood. Venting about your boss. Sharing something exciting. Your amygdala, hippocampus, and reward center run the show. Emotion, memory, meaning. Type 3, social. You're talking about people, relationships, identity, office politics, mutual friends, your beliefs. This flips on your default mode network, the system we use to think about other humans and about ourselves through their eyes. By the way, roughly 70% of our daily conversation is social. We are wired for it. Here's the critical thing. In a real conversation, these types don't stay put. They swap, blend, and shift on you. Your friend asks for help with a work problem. Practical. Then they mention how stressed they are, emotional. Then it turns into, how am I going to look to the team? Now you're social. All in 10 minutes. A supercommunicator senses those shifts in real time, and shifts with them. That's the whole book in one phrase, the matching principle. When both people are in the same type of conversation, brains sync. When they aren't, communication breaks. You've felt this. Your partner vents about their boss. You immediately jump to, here's what you should do. They're in emotional. You're in practical. They explode. I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to understand. Different types. different cognitive languages, instant disconnect. Psychologists who study married couples found the happiest ones consistently mirror each other's conversation style, repeating keywords, asking questions in the same register, matching where the focus is. The CIA teaches this as a required course. One officer told Duhigg that once he learned to sync, he started using it everywhere, with his parents, his partner, even the person at the checkout counter. His meetings became dramatically more productive. His words, "On the surface it feels like a Jedi mind trick, but it's really just a skill anyone can learn." That's the promise of this book. Not magic, just a skill. Let's break it down. Step 1. Figure out which conversation they're actually having. Most of us never pause to ask. We just start replying from our own head. But if you pause even 2 seconds, the clues are everywhere. Listen for the trigger words. I want to figure out. Practical. I feel. Emotional. He said, but they thought. Social. 2 seconds. That's it. And if you can't tell, ask directly. When your friend is ranting about their manager, just say, "Are you feeling more like this situation is impossible, or more like this person is impossible?" You'll get a clear answer, and now you know how to respond. Works the other way too. When you feel like the other person isn't getting you, tell them what kind of conversation you're trying to have. Not passive-aggressively, plainly. You can level this up for high-stakes moments. Before an important meeting or a hard conversation, write down 2 things. What kind of conversation is this, and what's the actual goal? Researchers tested this at a company where meetings kept exploding into arguments. They asked everyone to write 1 sentence before each meeting. This is to pick a budget everyone can agree on, or this is to brainstorm together. Verbal fights dropped dramatically. When people saw others' goals were different, they got more patient instead of more defensive. Some schools now train teachers to ask upset kids 1 question. Do you want help? Do you want a hug? Or do you want to be heard? Those 3 options map exactly onto the 3 types. Honestly, it's a question worth carrying into every relationship you care about. Because we assume we know what our friends and family need. Most of the time, we're wrong. 2 seconds. Ask or check. Practical conversations. Easier than you think. Type 1 is the simplest. Once you know it's practical, just have a practical conversation. Understand the problem. Understand where they are. Give your input. Iterate. 2 things trip people up. 1. Don't shoot down their idea immediately. The best response is yes and acknowledge what makes sense, then build. If you open by disagreeing, they go into defense mode and the conversation is over before it started. 2. Read body language correctly. Most of us think a quiet listener with a thoughtful look is taking it all in. Duhigg says, usually the opposite. Silence and a faraway stare often mean they've checked out, drafting a polite rejection or wandering off in their own thoughts. What actually shows agreement? Leaning in, a contact, small noises of engagement, and the counterintuitive one, interruption. If their question is about what you just said, they're interested. Interruption isn't rudeness. It's engagement. And if you're the one bringing a hard question, prep with 3 tiny questions. What do I want to talk about? What's the one thing I most want to land? If I could only ask them 1 question, what would it be? You don't need to write it out forever. Once it's a habit, you just run through it in your head walking into the meeting. Emotional conversations. It's not about feeling the same thing. Type 2 sounds easy. Sad? Be sad. Happy? Be happy. It's harder than it sounds. NASA figured this out in the 80s. They needed to pick astronauts for a year-long space station mission, people who had to get along perfectly in a metal tube. So they went back and studied 20 years of interview tapes, focusing on the astronauts who turned out to be great with people. They found it in laughter. The high EQ candidates matched the intensity of the interviewer's laugh. Big laugh met big laugh. Small chuckle met small chuckle. Casual joke got a casual response back. Here's what makes that finding land harder. Another group of psychologists recorded 1,200 real-world laughs. They were testing a simple hypothesis. People laugh because things are funny. Wrong. Fewer than 20% of laughs were about something actually funny. The other 80% plus were social signals. A way of saying, I want to connect with you. Laughing back was saying, same. So laughter isn't about humor. It's about wanting to belong to each other. It's emotional reciprocity, showing you actually received the other person's feeling, not just heard the words. Which means, real emotional matching isn't just nodding. You have to show it. Non-verbally. Laugh when they laugh. Sigh when they sigh. Frown when they frown. Widen your eyes at the shocking part. These aren't performances. They're proof you're actually in it with them. But there's a level most people miss. You have to match not just the emotion, you have to match the energy. NASA noticed this. If two people laugh at the same moment, but one is roaring and the other politely giggling, they don't feel closer afterward. The strength of the emotion is the alliance signal. Kind of matching isn't matching. Only when the feeling and the energy line up does your subconscious say, "This person is with me." Social conversations, the ones we have most and notice least. Type 3 is huge. 70% of our talk is social. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar, of Dunbar's number fame, has an even bolder theory: human language evolved for gossip. In early tribes, survival depended on knowing who to trust. Small circle, you could figure it out yourself. Big circle, you needed shortcuts, so we developed language to share intel. One dinner conversation and you get the map of the whole social world. Same instinct our primate cousins run on. We need to know who's a friend and who's out for themselves. So don't be surprised social conversation is 70% of what we do. We think we care most about the real work, but belonging is the real work. That's why the person who holds the most social information becomes the center of gravity. A supercommunicator often becomes that super hub, the one everyone wants to update, consult, keep close. To match in a social conversation, trade information, as long as it doesn't hurt a third party. If they're trash-talking someone, you don't have to fake it. Steer the conversation elsewhere. Or convert it. Ask, how did it feel when you found out? Now it's emotional. What do you think should actually happen here? Now it's practical. Different type. Same warmth. 2 more things Duhigg wants you to remember. 1. Nobody is one-dimensional. Everyone has multiple identities. Don't reduce someone to their job, their politics, their background. And if they're stuck in one identity, feeling defined by it, resenting it, help them see the other parts of themselves. 2. Keep the field level. Social conversations die the moment one person looks down on the other, or looks up too hard. Don't lead with your money, your credentials, your expertise. Everyone is an expert in something and a beginner in something else. The best social conversations happen when everyone stands eye to eye. Why this matters more than you think. Duhigg closes with the Harvard study of adult development, one of the longest-running studies in psychology. Started with 724 people, expanded to over 1,300 descendants. Tracked their entire lives. Health, work, marriages, friendships, everything. The question: what actually makes a life happy? What predicts health and longevity? The answer wasn't money, wasn't fame, wasn't achievement. It was relationships. If you boil 85 years of Harvard research down to one sentence: good relationships make us healthier and happier. That finding has been replicated hundreds of times. A supercommunicator is just someone who's really good at building those relationships. That's why they end up more successful at work and happier in life. And the whole secret is what we've been talking about. They know how to sync, how to match. But at the deepest level, the skill isn't really about technique. It's about genuine curiosity about other people. Patience to understand them. Basic decency. When we were young, we soaked up everything we could from other people. That's how we became who we are. But somewhere along the way, once we got competent and confident, a lot of us stopped being curious. We started performing instead of listening. Explaining instead of asking. The thing worth learning from supercommunicators isn't the tricks. It's that they never stopped wanting to actually know the person in front of them. Even when it's hard. Even when walking away would be easier. They keep telling themselves the same thing. Real connection is the most important thing in life. So here's your homework. Next real conversation you have with your partner, your kid, your coworker, the stranger next to you, pause 2 seconds. Ask yourself, what kind of conversation is this? What do they actually want right now? Help, a hug, or to be heard? Match that. Watch what happens. If this was useful, drop a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. What's one relationship in your life where you know you've been having the wrong kind of conversation? I'll see you in the next one.